All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of secret forms, lots of 68 comeback Elvis was the best Elvis. Let's get to it.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out!
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
Sifu, I'm doing great. I'm doing wonderful. It's a beautiful Saturday morning.
It is a beautiful Saturday. We have off today.
Yeah, but when this comes out, they won't know it's a Saturday.
They won't know it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I say, like I have off. I still have to do like an online lesson,
Okay.
which for me doesn't feel like work because I
And
love
then
what I
after
do.
that, I think got that fight.
We got the fight. Yeah. So this will be old by the time, we're going to be like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. And like, it's like something very
Was that
famous.
Fury
happened.
versus U.S.A?
Yeah, that's right.
You
Yeah.
sick.
Someone's going to slip on a banana peel on the way out in the ring and break their ankle, right? And that fight's not going to happen.
Oh, God.
So we are trying to get a few more episodes in the bag because I have to return to Europe next week.
Croatia, I hear.
Croatia, yeah, but this time not for teaching Wing Tsun as like last month in Hungary, but this time for my dad's 75th birthday. So shout out to Manfred.
Shout out to Manfred.
Turning 75, and then he's had, I don't know, and my father's
Mr.
German.
Richter.
I tell people he's gonna have his birthday in Croatia. Everyone's like, "Oh, like, are you like? Is that where you're from?" And like, no, like it's so nice there. My dad wanted to have his birthday there.
He's never been.
No, he hasn't. No,
Okay.
he has. It's like one of the few. My dad's been everywhere, right?
Okay.
And it's like one of the few places he hasn't been. I remember when we moved from New Jersey to Seattle, which was my freshman year of high school, which was just awful. I was about to start high school with all my friends, and then suddenly my parents are like, "Oh, we're moving to the opposite coast to some place called Issaquah, Washington, right?" And
Issaquah.
And like I wasn't too happy about that. But then my dad or my parents and all their infinite wisdom decided that let's take this angry teenager on his move by doing a family cross country drive to from New Jersey to Seattle. And so I was just miserable the whole time because this was in the days before phones.
Yeah,
this was in the days before
in the back
I'm
seat,
in the back seat just stewing, reading skateboard magazines. And wondering how I'm going to stay in touch with my friends.
I'm just picturing you back there, like,
so angry. Oh my god! And which is
looking out the window,
funny.
like,
well, it's funny the stuff like as a child that you feel is like the biggest catastrophe in your life, and then in hindsight you're like, oh please, that actually ended up being a really good thing. And Jesus Christ, get over yourself.
That time you already had your Taekwondo black belt.
I had my junior black belt.
Junior black belt. Oh, okay,
because
gotcha.
in the World Taekwondo Federation, that's WTF.
Yeah.
I'm joking. You could only have a junior black belt if you were not yet 15.
So
then I had the junior black belt, which in the WTF regulations was half black, half red.
Okay.
And then when I moved to Seattle, there are WTF schools everywhere.
Everywhere.
In fact, when you see Taekwondo, the ones that their gi top is not like the traditional kimono style, but it's like a V-neck top that you put over. That's WTF. And so when when there are WTF schools everywhere, and there was one in the Seattle area, and I joined it for a short time.
Got that black
until I turned 15 and I got the full black belt, and then it was off to Wing Tsun.
Yeah,
and it was off to Wing Tsun.
So if there's like a Detroit Taekwondo Federation, is that the DTF?
Damn.
It's gotta bring that energy. It's gotta bring that.
It's nonstop. It doesn't end.
Awful.
It will never end.
No, it'll never end.
It will never end.
He's always trying to get us canceled in some kind of way. Demonetized, deplatformed.
He's like, I hate doing this so much. I want to get us canceled.
I know, seriously. But you know what? We'll make him read some Mashita Kim for his crimes at the end of this episode.
That's what gets his juices flowing.
That's what gets his jade stem flowing.
That's why he got so early.
Yeah.
So
anyway, before we get started, just want to remind everyone that the best way to support the Kung Fu Genius podcast is on Patreon. Patreon.com/The Kung Fu Genius. For as little as $5 a month, you can support your favorite Kung Fu podcast out of New York. And get access to episodes early, my Instagram subscriber reels, and all sorts of goodies there. You can see all the various tiers. If you don't want to go all the way over to Patreon, you can support us right here on YouTube if this is where you consume this content. We have a couple membership options, and including like the ability to get your questions done in an AMA episode and access to deep historical dives. I'm just polishing up my second video for my subscribers on the history of Wing Chun and Chinese martial arts, and I did the first video for the subscribers on the Yip Man history, where I read Yip Man's translation of the history, you know, with the five elders and blah 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 blah, and then I gave some like kind of critical remarks to it and what we know could be true and what we know is not true. And then now for the second one, I've decided to now read the older story of what happened at the Shaolin Temple, which is the Triad Hong Moon origin story. And then we can compare the two and talk a little bit about that. So I'm just going to probably edit that later today and pop that up for our guys. So,
like it.
So yeah, so we got a couple questions. We actually we were going to record these a few weeks ago, and then our equipment died.
We were recording.
Yeah, we were recording it, and our equipment died 20 minutes in. It became a lost episode. So here we are trying to do it again.
Yeah. All right. Take two. So, Fire Rabbit.
Fire Rabbit.
And I love the Fire Rabbit with the trademark.
Yes.
Up in the top corner.
Well, so you know it's the real one.
Oh yeah. I don't know how he got that TM up in that corner.
It's a keyboard.
Oh,
you know your emoji.
Right.
You know
You're
your
right.
emoji keyboard.
You're right.
Go to the last panel. That's where you have all the TM and the C and all that kind of stuff.
Sweet.
That is an iPhone tip for you.
Wow.
From the
So
Kung
he's
Fu
into
Genius.
transcendental meditation.
That's right. How much did he pay for his mantra?
Oh God. I'm moving forward. So, I think we already tackled that first question. I'm gonna go to number 2.
I
Right?
think we already tackled that first question.
Yeah. Sifu Emin Bo Steppy would be a fun interview. Okay, these are about interviews.
Those aren't questions.
It would be,
right?
yes. Okay.
It was I had asked our Patreons who they want me to interview.
Yeah.
By the way, I did a poll on Patreon with the usual suspects, like Sifu David Peterson, but I threw up Sifu Carson Lau, Sifu Kanchpek, a few other people. The number one person is Sifu Kanchpek that people want me to do an interview with. So I'm gonna try my damnedest to make
That's
that
my
work.
choice as well.
And then people also want Sifu Lau and Sifu David Peterson. And I also want Peter Lorge, who wrote one of the best Chinese martial arts history books, like an actual proper history, not a bullshit, let me tell you about a Shaolin temple where all these arts came from.
No.
So I would love to have him on there as well. So yeah, super excited. So I think that the first part of Fire Rabbit's response was responding to like who he thinks I should interview. But then I know there were some questions tacked on the end there. Yeah.
As for subjects for a future show, what would it take for Chinese martial arts to gain popularity again when it comes to gaining new practitioners and more kung fu movies?
Well, that's like a 2-part question. I think part 1 doesn't have that much to do with part 2. Because whether there are more kung fu movies being made,
That doesn't bring students in?
No, the other way around. Like kung fu schools being popular, I don't know how much of an effect that would now have on
I see.
them wanting to make more movies because of the way the entertainment trends are going in terms of action, right? It's interesting because it's always like cyclical, right? Like so you have if you look kind of back into the trends of martial arts, let's just like look at Hong Kong films, right?
Yeah.
So in the late 60s, you had some kind of fist and foot, like unarmed fighting movies, but a lot of them were actually more like sword, like what in Mandarin is known as wuxia or mohawk.
Okay.
In Cantonese, he's kind of like movies that are in the style of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, sword epics.
What was the famous one from the 60s that I'm thinking of?
There's a few of them.
Yeah.
One with Chang Pei Pei's Come Drink With Me. There's also One Armed Swordsman.
Yes.
Yeah, with
Come
Jimmy
Drink
Wang
With Me.
Yu and stuff. Yeah. So they were, there's a lot of these kind of sword style films, right?
Okay.
And the funny thing is a lot of those Chinese films in the 60s that were using, Chinese straight sword and there were these a lot of them were based on old myths, but they were also liberally copying from the Japanese at that time. The Japanese cinema and samurai films doing so well. You could see like the way sometimes the blood would spatter the Chinese movies. They were taking a lot of notes from Japanese films at that time.
Interesting.
But the idea that that you could just have like a fist fighting movie that was that compelling was slowly coming into being. You had like Lo Lee with Five Fingers of Death, and which actually predated the Bruce Lee film. So there was already this trend of moving a little bit out of the sword genre and into more of like the punch and kick genre, right?
Okay.
And then came Bruce Lee, right? So like the stage was almost set. And it's interesting because if you look at the cycle of Hong Kong martial arts, although in our own martial art, Wing Chun gained popularity in the 50s and in the 60s, that time period was really a little rough for Chinese martial arts because in Hong Kong, the perception was that most people who did martial arts had some kind of connection to the triads. So either you were like a triad
they didn't
member.
want to touch it.
Yeah, so either you were like a triad member and you were learning martial arts because you needed to crack some skulls or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or
Break some legs.
or some martial arts schools themselves were directly related or involved with triad activity. There was kind of a perception of Chinese martial arts being a little low class and a little uncouth for the average Hong Kong person. It wasn't this idea of the scholarly warrior, right? That kind of trend had died, at least in Hong Kong. And it had a very bad reputation. Now, not with everyone. I mean, obviously, a lot of people practice martial arts who were like good-natured people. Like if you look at Yip Mun's first generation in the 50s, I mean, look at, the Choi Sung-tin and Wong Sun-leung and all these guys.
A bunch of restaurant workers and stuff.
But, it's like they're wearing suits. And like, I mean, these aren't like a bunch of like, you like gun-toting
Derelicts.
Gangsters or whatever, right? But different schools were a little bit different. There were, like I said, some schools that had direct relation to triads, some styles of mantis. I believe Dai Sing Pekwa Monkey Kung Fu was heavily triad involved. Some white eyebrow styles.
Yeah.
So it was more like, this school, that school. But the reputation in Hong Kong was that Chinese martial arts people tend to be kind of low class and on the spectrum, maybe more on the triad end of things. So it was something that it had some acceptance, some films, some things like that, but it wasn't really like the thing to do. But in the late 60s, that started to change.
Okay.
So there were, and partially because of efforts of people like my man crush, Tang Sang, who, because of his influence as a high-ranking police officer, was able to kind of grease the wheels to get some laws and rules changed. They, for example, fist fighting contests, like martial art tournaments, were illegal in Hong Kong. They didn't have them. And then he was able to overturn some of these sanctions and slowly start to get kung fu fighting contests by the 1970s, where you had equipment on. Yeah. They were full contact for the most part. But that was because of efforts of people like Tang Sang. They formed the Hong Kong Chinese Martial Arts Association to kind of create a unified front of martial arts and to change the perception of it. Which is so funny that you have all these legitimate martial artists coming together. That the main founders of the Hong Kong Chinese Martial Arts Association were people like Kwan Ta Keng, the godfather of Hong Kong films. Lok Chi Fu, like from White Crane. You had Long Kai Ming. All of these like OGs. Yeah. Tang Sang was also on there, and then they wanted to change the perception of martial arts for the Hong Kong people. And the funny thing was, Tang Sang was the one perhaps most involved in that, and he was like a gangster himself, right? So it's just kind of funny. Like, well, he wasn't a gangster; he was a detective, but he was on the take, and so it's kind of funny. It took like the corrupt guy to clean shit up, right? Yeah. And then Leung Teng was also involved in a lot of these activities in the late 60s. Teaching at Baptist University, was the first open Wing Chun. It was the first open Kung Fu class at a higher education facility. Wow. It was like the first time the university had like a martial arts class like that, right? It was actually Leung Teng in the late 60s at Baptist University. So the attitudes of people in Hong Kong towards Chinese martial arts were changing. Yeah. Because it was becoming The
It was
tournaments were becoming
scholarly
legal
again.
Yeah, there was a little more prominence, some more fist fighting films. Leung Teng's teaching Wing Chun. There are more schools that are opening. I mean, Leung Teng's teaching Wing Chun at the university level. So it was kind of a perfect storm that just a couple of years before Bruce Lee came to make his movie, things were like, you know, when you look at it in hindsight, it's like, oh, it was the perfect storm. But it just is what it is, right? And that kind of allowed, it kind of greased the groove for Bruce Lee to come in, right?
Oh, wow.
And then so you have Bruce Lee comes and like
And
a
it
flash.
explodes.
And like a flash, he's gone.
Damn.
And then you have this period of people figuring out, well, they all really liked what they saw Bruce Lee do, but they can't necessarily replace that. All right. They tried with all these Bruce Lee Lealikes and stuff like that. But I mean, I know there's some people that really like those movies, but I fucking hate all. I can't stand that shit.
Oh, the Bruce Lies and the Bruce Lays?
Yeah, because for me, it's like watching movies by Elvis impersonators, but you're somewhat, it's somewhat implied. No, but this actually is Elvis.
Oh,
and you're like,
man.
no, it's an Elvis impersonator.
No, it's not Elvis.
And I don't care how good the
Why are
Elvis
you
impersonator
trying to-
is.
yeah.
He ain't Elvis. By the way, speaking of Elvis, I know this is a tangent.
What?
All right. The Paramount, I have the Paramount Plus app.
Yeah.
They have a documentary on his 68 comeback special. And it's
This is a
Favorite Elvis,
must.
by the way.
yeah, that is the
This is
best
a
album. That is for me.
must-see.
That is like peak.
Yeah.
He was experienced, but he wasn't quite yet fat bloated Elvis.
He was in great shape.
He was in
Just
great
came back
shape.
like
That was Karate Elvis.
Yeah, and in
Yeah.
the full black leather suit, and then it's a documentary. It's an hour and a half. I think it's about an hour and a half.
Have you watched it yet?
I did. It was one of the reasons why you came here this morning. I was still in bed because I was like, I always go to bed.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I always go to bed early. I'm like the most boring dude you've ever met.
Up to 3 a.m.
But like last night I got home and like
Yeah.
I'm watching this Elvis thing. I'm also like getting into like Mike Menzer, who's like this bodybuilder, like his methods, watching all his videos. And I was, and dude, I'm watching Elvis. I know this is a tangent for Kung Fu fans. But it was just, I was watching him and I was getting goosebumps
Yeah.
because he was just so cool.
Yeah.
And he was like, I can't even describe it. Like his style, the way he talked, his confidence, his ability to just sing and command that audience. And like, he was just so good at everything, man. Elvis, man.
Yeah.
And I was looking at him and just going like, wow, what amazing, like how amazing would it have been to have been there and to see him and all of that. And like, you know, and then he's like gone. And it's like, are there any pioneers anymore in stuff like music or martial art films where you're going to get like when you watch the Elvis comeback special or you watch Bruce Lee Enter the Dragon or you watch just anyone who was kind of the first to do something like that? Will we still have these feelings for anyone else in the future?
It can happen. It has to happen.
But I just feel that
It's just so far
with
few
music
between.
and with music
Right.
and with film, all the groundbreaking shit seems to have happened.
Yeah.
And like the massive
It just
talent
takes that
really had
sheer
to.
determination, man.
Yeah, but in the old days, like
not everyone has it.
Yeah, but here's me being a cranky old fool.
Okay.
All right. When I look at like celebrities nowadays.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, of course, with exceptions.
I had a conversation like this.
like now you have a lot of paths to become famous. All right.
Right.
Like you could have a YouTube channel that takes off and suddenly you're boxing fucking Mike Tyson. All right. That was not an avenue that was
wasn't a
available
thing.
to you in the 50s and 60s.
No, this is
All right. And you know, no, it was like just becoming famous because you had a viral video or you did something funny or whatever, right?
Right.
I just have a feeling like in those days,
no.
like just look at Elvis. Elvis was not just someone who had a nice voice.
Right.
He could perform.
Charisma.
He had charisma. When
King
he
of
was
charisma.
being interviewed, he knew how to speak to interviewers. He knew how to interact with people.
Yeah.
And I find like nowadays, like a lot of celebrities, like maybe they had a cool hit song, let's say in the music industry, but like you put a mic in their face and it's like they're a bag of rocks. You know what I mean? Because they just became famous because they got some song, but they don't have that like
Yeah.
Peter, like watching Peter Sellers on a talk show in the 70s. It's
Yeah.
just like, like the stories and just being funny off the cuff and everything like that. Like I just don't see anyone now being that good.
No, that time has passed. There's no more of that. And there's never going to be that.
I think we can blame it on social media.
Yeah.
Or the phones or just the distractions of the world.
That would be too easy. No, it's corporate. Everything's been corporatized, right? I have this conversation about rock music all the time. It's like, even back, I'd say the 90s, when you had all of the grunge coming out. Like, you couldn't have a band like Primus now, who were commercially successful, but absolutely batshit crazy out there doing songs like Tommy the Cat and, you know, like, I Like Puppies and all this kind of stuff, you know what I mean?
Right.
And, like, they're just, you just can't, what do we have now? The Imagine Dragons? 21 Pilots? Like,
so I don't even know any of those.
Exactly. And if you looked at them, they all look exactly the same.
Right.
And not to like harp on about the person I hate with a fiery vengeance, but you couldn't have someone like Phil Collins, a balding, slightly fat English person, being such a huge superstar now because everyone has to have six packs and they're all boring and they're all come out.
Well, it's just another day for you and me in paradise.
You know,
did he go to Phil Collins?
Yeah, he had to go there.
Is this because Phil Collins is always on his mind?
I think so.
He was rent-free in my head.
But you know, the thing is, like back in the day, if you wanted to be top in music or whatever, you had to work your way up. You had to be able to audition. You had to be able to talk to a producer. You had to be able to represent you. Like, look at Bruce Lee. Look at Bruce Lee's screen test.
Everything is so easy.
Yep. Do you remember the green, like what later became essentially his Green Hornet screen test, although technically it was for Charlie Chan. And he's like, he's 24. He's just been in the States for like 5 years.
Wow.
He came from another country, and there he is in Hollywood doing an audition, speaking English, being funny, demonstrating, you know, being engaging.
Yeah.
You know, and that was someone who didn't even grow up here. All right. And now you look at the kids, they grow up here, they can't sit and represent themselves that way. I don't know. I just feel, this is just me being a grumpy old man, but I just feel like a lot of the celebrities nowadays are just very vacuous. You listen to, like, maybe they have some talent in what they do, but then you put a camera in front of them and they're just like a bag of rocks. So anyway, it makes me think of last night I was at Bill's and there was a piano player that comes in every Friday, plays the piano. Is it Billy Joel?
No.
Oh, sorry, this piano
We'll leave him nameless. But the guy comes in and you know, my buddy who owns the place, he's like, I don't know. It's just he's sucking all the energy out of the room. You know, it seems boring.
Right.
I might be done with this guy. Right. And I'm like, damn.
Right.
And then upstairs there was a party, a graduation party, and a keyboardist was up there playing.
Yeah.
The whole night. He comes down to see what's happening. He's done with that party upstairs. He's like, oh, can I get on? And the guy finishes his session, and this kid, he's probably like 19, destroys it.
Really?
Destroys the piano, and everyone's, wow! And me in the back, I'm like, damn, I feel bad for that guy. The guy who just got off.
Yeah.
Because it was just like night and day.
Right.
But the kid is a young, talented, like, juggernaut.
Right.
But his personality is just like,
right. Yeah. Bag of rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Bag of rocks.
Everyone's like, yo, that was incredible. He's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, you need to go for it, man.
Oh, but his playing was just.
So anyway, I think we got to get back to our question.
I know.
So,
Hey everyone, just want to let you know Wing Tsun Illustrated is now offering a paperback edition through Amazon, reaching a larger global market. And no, they're not ditching the glossy magazine edition through MagCloud. You can now simply choose the version of this magazine you prefer and the one with the cheapest shipping wherever you live. Order your copy of Wing Tsun Illustrated today across 12 Amazon marketplaces with free shipping for Prime members. Go and check that out.
So anyway, you look at the trend, you look after Bruce Lee, right? And then kind of Kung Fu hits back again, like with Shaw Brothers and then Golden Harvest. They start making a lot of period pieces. And this like fad of Kung Fu movies and like period like films that are supposed to be in the Ming or Qing dynasty or maybe early 20th century. That goes on until about the early 80s. And early mid 80s, and then it starts kind of like anything else. It's like these trends at some point.
And then the ninjas came out.
No, I'm talking about in Hong Kong.
Okay.
So then in Hong Kong, then Jackie pivoted and started making modern action movies with stunts.
Yes.
Big crazy stunts. And then that kind of brought in a whole genre of modern Hong Kong action. And that's why you see in the 80s, especially mid to late 80s, there's more of a trend for modern action movies, shoot 'em ups, that kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
With martial arts. And then at some point in the early 90s, Choi Hak, a director from Hong Kong who actually got educated here in the States, decided to revive the old Wong Fei Hung character and then use Jet Li. Yeah. And then made what we call Once Upon a Time in China. In the Chinese title is actually just Wong Fei Hung. And suddenly it was a huge hit. And then there was this whole new era of wire fu where everyone is like, where everything is under crank, sped up, and everyone's on wires and stuff like that. And then that gave way to like more sword epics and you know, into the early 2000s, you get movies like Hero and stuff like that. And then now it kind of went back to modern action movies. And then now it's kind of, now the only thing that they make in Hong Kong.
So the wire fu stuff is pretty much over.
Yes. Yeah. Although there are a lot of people, they didn't like the wire fu genre. They always used wires in Hong Kong films. But in the early 90s, if you look at movies like Once Upon a Time in China or Last Hero in China or Feng Sai Yuk or any of those movies, they were using wires, not like in the Shaw days. They would occasionally use a wire to like make it look like someone could jump up onto a wall. Although usually that was just him jumping off and they played it in reverse, right? Or maybe that the guy would just hang in the air for a brief moment longer than is humanly possible. But then in the early 90s, they were really like for example, in the Jet Li movie, the no shadow kick Mo Yin Guk, which is a real thing. His Hungar Mo Yin Guk is that he like turns sideways in the air and then just does these like bicycle kicks flying this way here. So it's like completely in the realm of fantasy, right?
Yeah.
I always appreciated more how Jackie used the wires in Drunken Master 2, where it's like he used a little bit of wires, but he used it just like when he would get kicked in the head to yank him, so we would make the kick that he received look more powerful, or he would jump in the air and it would be just like a half a beat longer than a human can really do it. So it just kind of stretched reality a tiny bit. I like that. Because I just feel like when they start flying and all that kind of stuff, unless it's a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon movie where it's supposed to be like fantasy, that's a different thing. But like, I don't like the whole like flying thing. So then now movies like Hong Kong, those kind of films are basically all dead because now all they do is they just make films that pander to China. They're either these big, ridiculous epics or, dramas or something like that. But I think that era of Kung Fu films, as far as Hong Kong, is really gone because so much and as a Kung Fu fan and a Kung Fu instructor, like I also get it. There is only so much you can do with the genre. That you're just gonna have to either wait a really long time before there's a new audience that didn't grow up with all the stuff we did, and then it can be reintroduced in a modern way to them.
That's what I'm thinking.
But
I
think
that needs reintroduced.
I think that needs to be more time
because there are so many, children out there or young people that want that, but they don't know they want it. Yeah.
But I think right now the trend, like in martial art movies, at least here, is like you have stuff like Roadhouse. It's like a very mixed martial arts and stuff like that. But I think that there's not as much they can do with that genre. I kind of like the John Wick stuff.
I was just about to ask you.
I like what they did there.
Like that? Yeah.
Well, I also have a feeling that for the next couple of years, a lot of martial arts stuff that comes out is all going to look like John Wick.
Like a John Wick style.
Yeah, they're going to do that.
I love Nobody.
Yeah, Nobody.
Fight scenes in Nobody are epic.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I don't know if Kung Fu itself becoming more popular has a direct effect in more of these films being made. It seems that would be the case, but not necessarily, because I don't think that even if Kung Fu becomes more popular, I don't think it's ever going to like replace something like mixed martial arts.
Let me ask you: the Taken movies are like the Born Identity stuff, right? Is that same kind of?
I only saw the first Taken, but I know. Yeah, I know.
Oh,
but I did watch The Equalizer.
I love Equalizer too.
I like it too.
I love
that
all
was great.
Of them. Yeah. I just love that character.
Yeah. He's
I love seeing
so methodical.
kick ass.
Yeah.
Radically different to the 80s Equalizer played by famous British actor Edward Woodward.
Woodward. Oh my God, what a shitty name. Edward Woodward. Right? Excuse me, sir. Are you Edward Woodward?
Why?
Yeah.
Why is his name that?
Edward Woodward.
Why?
Oh my God, that's an incredible name.
Why would you do that, parents?
Edward Woodward.
Parents jacked him up with that one.
Edward Woodward.
Edward Woodward. It sounds like it's part of a
That's a
tongue
practical
twister.
joke on
Yeah, no,
the
it's part of a much longer tongue twister.
No, parents are mean.
Yeah. So
Parents are mean.
the
man.
question was also what can be done to make Kung Fu more popular? Well, I think that's maybe a slightly more interesting question. Because I think the first thing is that Chinese Kung Fu people really need to kind of get their head out of the 20th century, get their head out of the Qing dynasty.
Yeah.
And be a little more and be a little more honest about what they're doing and what they're presenting and what they're teaching. Because when you look at something like I look at a more what people think is a more traditional Kung Fu style, something like Hong Kong or Choi Lei Fat.
Right.
You look, they have all these forms. You have to do all the stance work. You have to learn all these drills. You learn all these weapons. Like the corpus of forms is quite large.
Oh yeah.
So the question is, okay, well, why would somebody want to learn something like so detailed, intensive, so long, so intricate, right? Well, because it's an amazing art.
I think that's what their approach would be, right?
Yes.
I want to learn this art because this has been around for whatever amount of time.
But I think that the Chinese Kung Fu people need to pivot, especially like Wing Chun is a special case, and maybe I just feel it's a special case because it's the one I do. But I see that bias, and I'll admit it. I see it, right? But I'll just leave Wing Chun out of the equation for a moment.
We try.
In the other styles, I think that if they really go for it, like, hey, this is an art form. Like something like, ballet or something like that, where it's difficult and it's got, you have to really train hard to be able to do it well, but it's like an art form.
Okay.
And I'm not saying, what those guys are doing is dancing or whatever. I just mean like that. That if they kind of admit, the perception.
Use that approach.
The perception, I think, among a lot of martial artists nowadays, modern martial artists, if they even think about things like Kung Fu, is that, it is kind of like an art form. And maybe that doesn't really work for fighting, but there's something cool about it. You can do stuff with it in the movie.
It's just a movement.
And I think that if Kung Fu people from those more traditional kind of melodic styles pivoted and just owned that, you know what I mean? Instead of saying like, oh no, you can also like totally fight using these like crazy intricate movements, and you can even use them against a modern fighter. I go, well, I don't know about that, right?
Yeah.
Now, I believe that if someone is teaching a very classic martial art like that, a very lyrical martial art, they should also pay attention to self-defense. So they should say maybe in every class you have 15 minutes where you do something really practical and realistic. Getting out of holds, someone pinning you down, someone taking a swing at you, someone trying to tackle you. If they just dedicated 15 minutes a class to like something that is realistic, put some gloves on, put your hands up, kind of, do some scenario training, do something that, imitates what goes on there. And then the rest of the class you dedicate it to your traditional martial art. I think something like that. Okay. If they don't want to just fully go the artistic route and they still want to offer some things like, self-defense or whatever, then, maybe they need to look into, what some of the more modern styles do for stuff like that. And then just teach that within the class. All right. So that's one avenue where it's like own it, that what you do is an art form.
Okay.
And treat it as such. Okay. And the other one, I think, which is maybe more relevant for Wing Chun, which has always kind of floated in both worlds, lately because of, I believe, a lot of misguided Wing Chun people not understanding the difference between practical fighting and ring fighting. And I don't mean jabbing someone in the eyes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean just like, which we've talked about on the podcast many times. It's like if you want to challenge someone who's a kickboxer or an MMA guy and you don't have any knowledge of boxing or kickboxing footwork or how to keep someone at distance, I don't have much confidence you're going to be able to apply your Wing Chun against that guy. You're going to say, well, I purely do Wing Chun, which is designed for either being suddenly accosted and assaulted really quickly, so you just got to go and do your thing, or more specifically to fight against other styles of kung fu, but not necessarily to go back and forth with someone who is like, using some kind of boxing format. You need to learn that, learn how to move and check distance, and don't run into punches, and don't just sail in with chain punches from a mile away to get caught with a left hook. Like, learn how to play that game of tag and cat and mouse. And when the guy comes in or you find an entry, you can go in and then apply your Wing Chun. I think if you just make a couple modifications, you can do it. But for whatever reason, a lot of Wing Chun people haven't gotten the memo.
No.
It's like they want to compete with these other martial arts in their arena without knowing anything about it. All right. And they go, no, that's where you f***ed up. All right. No. And I think that, if Wing Chun people either go the art route, okay, the some representations of Wing Chun are definitely more artistic. So say, okay, you either own the art thing, like I said, with some of the more lyrical styles, or you do something where, okay, you teach it as an art form, but you dedicate 15, 20 minutes to every class for something really practical and grimy and almost secular to your martial arts religious portion, right? Or you update the training methodologies and you make Wing Chun more relevant for self-defense or practical fighting or sport fighting. Either go one of those three or take a couple of those routes. But you can't just keep doing what you're doing and expect that somehow there's going to be some great Wing Chun savior that goes into the ring and beats everyone up using extremely classical Wing Chun. Wow. You don't have this requirement of any of the other arts that are in mixed martial arts. All right. Thai boxing, and especially Thai kicks, elbows, knees, that kind of clinch work is 100% an integral part of what we now call mixed martial arts. But there's no one who is a pure Muay Thai guy who goes into mixed martial arts with success.
Okay.
If someone was just a pure Muay Thai guy with no wrestling and no jiu-jitsu, they would get killed. All right. But yet somehow people use elements of Wing Chun in mixed martial arts, and they get some shout outs from Joe Rogan, and different videos and stuff like that. But people still go, but how come Wing Chun doesn't work in the mixed martial arts arena? What singular martial art works in the mixed martial arts arena? None of them. It's mixed martial arts, right? Yeah. So that's how I feel about that.
Hey, Kung Fu Genius fans. If you like what we do here, please consider supporting us on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get early access to episodes and other goodies not posted on the Kung Fu Genius channel. With higher levels of support, you can get your name in the description, a live chat with me, or at the baller level, you even get your own personal KFG episode with me as my guest. The link to our Patreon page is in the description of this episode below. Patreons have a direct link to chat with me and get first dibs on any questions for Ask Me Anything episodes. Click on the link in the description for our Patreon page for more information, and I'll see you on Patreon.
So, was there another question on
there? There was another part to that. Let's get right back into it. Let's see. Boom, bam, bam, bang.
I think that's like those are his filler things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get.
If you were.
Nothing. Carry on.
If you were to add an additional form to WT, what would you tailor it towards addressing? Thank you.
Well, it's funny because my view is Wing Chun has enough forms. We need less.
Yeah.
All right. Because I feel that there's always been a bit of forms. I'm just going to talk about Wing Chun now. The relationship between forms and Wing Chun is a bit hot and cold. Okay. So because for people who learn Wing Chun, that it's a spectrum. All right. There's no like, all people who do Wing Chun agree on XYZ. All right. Like you would really, I think it's almost impossible to make a non-controversial statement in Wing Chun that some other Wing Chun guy wouldn't have an issue with. Even if you said something which should be as non-controversial as Wing Chun uses a vertical fist. All right. Yeah. But there's some sifus that actually teach their students to torque it and turn it in a little bit. And so even something like Wing Chun uses a vertical fist, right, which Yip Man said in his interview, right? you could still find some Wing Chun person to get their panties in a twist about that.
Oh man!
So it's actually very difficult to have like an axiom of Wing Chun that everyone's like, oh, you know what I mean? Like it would have to be extremely vague or broad. All right, and so we already have that issue. Now, when it comes to forms, in the very traditional mindset of, let's say, Yip Man Wing Chun, you would learn the Siunum Tao form. You wouldn't do much else. And part of that was to make sure that you were really serious, that you wanted to stick around, that, you know, the form was a little bit of a shit test. Put someone in this pigeon-toed stance, holding their knees in. Yes, of course. There's a lot of great benefit, stance training, waist alignment, weight distribution, elbow power, relaxation, all the things that you need to do Wing Chun well. Obviously, it's all there in the form.
Right.
But making someone do nothing but the Siunum Tao form for 9 months.
How many people dropped out?
Yeah.
In those days.
It was a bit of a shit test to see whether that student was really serious.
Yeah.
So that meant that there was a different viewing of the forms for people who maybe learned Wing Chun in the 50s as opposed to people who learn Wing Chun today. Because people who learn Wing Chun today are like, oh, I want to learn the Siunum Tao Chum Kip Buji. They want to learn everything really quickly. They go and they see everything online and they want to run through it really quickly. And back then, they would just be happy to be able to come and do the Siunum Tao forms, right?
Yeah.
And they would just do that. And when are you going to learn Chum Kyo? I'll learn Chum Kyo when Sifu says I'm ready. But nowadays, it's like, when can I learn Chum Kyo? You know what I mean? How about when your Siunum Tao doesn't suck ass? All right? Okay, like how about that? All right?
No.
Do you think your Siunum Tao form is good enough to learn the second form?
Oh, God.
All right? Or you just need to learn it because you can go on YouTube and see it, right? So they took the forms training a little more seriously. Chan Chi Man used to tell me that when he would learn from Yip Sifu in the morning, he oftentimes was the only one there because a lot of his other classmates would come for the evening or afternoon class. So he would do the Siunum Tao form across from Yip Man. They would Yip Man would be his mirror.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he would go there and then he would just follow the exact pacing of his Sifu. So he knew the right speed to do the Fok Sao and the Wu Sao because he was just literally following how his Sifu did. And then
have you done Siunum Tao with Chan Sifu?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. And he said after he was done doing the form, then Yip Man would maybe give him a couple corrections, and then he would tell him to continue practicing on his own. So it's like he would do it one time with the old man, then he would do it on his own, and then he said sometimes Yip Man would go over to the wall bag and hit the wall bag, you know, and he's there still doing his Siunum Tao form, right? And he was happy. Right?
I love it.
And then, you know, so then to learn the Chum Kyu form, it's like, ooh, now you're going to be able to turn and step and kick, right? And coordinate hands and feet. Well, it's a big deal, right?
Okay.
So then you learn the Chum Kyu and you presumably double arm Chi Sao and all that stuff. And then, you know, if you pay your Sifu a red packet after you've been around for a while, you can learn Buji. These things were like a big deal, right? You one had to be qualified, and two, you had to be qualified, all right, monetarily, and the old man had to want to teach you. So it was like a big deal to learn these things. You had to put in the time, you had to put in the effort. Nowadays, people just go on YouTube, they teach themselves the forms, and then they wonder why
they suck.
They still suck. And it's like, well, because first of all, the way you're looking at any of this stuff, all right, just doing the choreography. If you just learn the choreography of the Siunum Tao, which an averagely talented, hardworking person could teach themselves to form in a day or two, all right, even from video watching, all right, that would teach yourself nothing more than just to pantomime movements in the air. But do you know why the hand is in the center? Do you know why the wrist has to be there? Why is your shoulder here? Why is your elbow here? Why do you have to stay in a squared position? How do you breathe? How fast are the movements? Why do we do it this way and not this way? Why is this important? All of those things that you're supposed to be learning parallel to learning the form, you're not learning that when you just pantomime movements you taught yourself from some video you saw on YouTube. All right? So then they're learning the choreography without the content. And then what do they do after they've done it a couple times? They go and they teach themselves the second form. All right? So now they can pantomime a new set of movements in the air with no content. Why do we turn? Why do we do this? Why is it repeated 3 times? Why do we have this punch? Why do we go from here? You know, where's my elbow supposed to be? Why do we do it this way and not this way, right? How does this apply? Why is this here? Blah, 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 blah. They're not going to get that stuff done when they just literally teach themselves movements pantomiming someone's movements, right? So then the problem is the new generation, and I speak very generally. I'm not talking about in my school. I'm just saying, like, in general, what I see is the new generation much more so blames their inadequacies in Wing Chun on what they haven't learned yet. And in the old days, in the EWTO, the old days for the EWTO, the 70s and 80s, the old days for Yip Man Wing Chun, the 50s, they didn't necessarily know the pole and the dummy and all the advanced stuff. They only knew the basics. But with those basics, how to close the gap against an aggressive opponent. The use of pakta, lapsao, foksao, gansao, basic movements, right? Closing the gap, relentless pressure, chain punches, sticking, driving, moving out of the way, staying on top of a very aggressive opponent. They were able to do that, and those are basics. And they weren't going, I can't fight because I haven't learned Buji yet, or I haven't learned Wundami yet. Or if they lost the fight, they wouldn't go, I lost the fight because I had not yet learned Buji. No, you just lost the fight because that other guy's better than you. All right, not because the style, right? But now the style gets the blame, paradoxically, at a time where people are going the most shallow into it.
Right.
They want the least commitment into the style, just teach themselves the forms, maybe go on Instagram, learn a couple combos from some of these big Instagram accounts, teaching crap out of context.
Yeah.
And then when it doesn't work, blame Wing Chun. Even though what they've taught themselves is devoid of content.
Question.
Yeah.
The time when you were learning and you had that tournament fight that you beat the guy up in the
Sport Jiu-Jitsu tournament. Yeah. At James DeMile's school.
Right.
Yeah.
Were there forms? Were you guys doing forms? Sunum Tao,
No, in the
Chun Kyu?
non-classical Wing Chun, we didn't do forms.
No forms. So you were learning applications without the forms.
Yeah. Chain punches and stuff.
How is that? How was that?
Great. I mean, it's a different methodology than non-classical Kung Fu or Wing Chun Do from James DeMille or Chinjo Wing Chun from John Bial. They're all from that Seattle period, and there were no forms.
Wow.
You had your warm-up. It was heavy with chain punches and steps, and paks. That was all applied. Yeah. And so I mean, there and that's part of the reason why I did want to learn the classical Wing Chun, because I'm like, I'm learning Wing Chun without forms, but from a practical perspective, could kind of see how it worked. And that was the reason why I got into that. But like nowadays, everyone just thinks like, if they get hit, it's because my Siva won't teach me wooden dummy or something like that. It's like, no, you got hit because you didn't apply the basics.
No.
Or maybe you just got hit because the other guy's better than you.
Yeah.
It's funny, like if someone lost in a karate tournament back in the 80s, they wouldn't blame karate.
No.
They would say, that guy beat me.
Yeah.
All right. They wouldn't,
Fair and square.
Yeah, but now it's like a Wing Chun person loses and they're like, it's because of Wing Chun. It's like, well,
I need to learn more stuff.
How come Wing Chun was able to beat up people in the 50s? How come in the 70s and 80s, the EWTO made a career by taking a lot of karate and judo instructors and showing them in a very practical way how Wing Chun worked and convincing them, and they became the first generation of Wing Chun instructors, right? People like Emin did not back down to most of the people who were standing in front of him and did very, very well. And now, in this like very modern era where people kind of have a very loose connection to training Wing Chun in any kind of deep way, now those are the guys who want to go out and fight, in mixed martial arts or whatever. You get these phony guys in China fighting Xu Xiaodong. It's like, I mean, of course, what do you expect? These guys are not serious. Okay. And also, if they were serious, they would know that they were not prepared to fight in mixed martial arts. Okay. Like for me, my skill set is not in mixed martial arts. It's not in the cage. Right. As much as and I'm not saying like that's something that I would have done anyway, but I'm just saying like, despite the fact that I have done kickboxing, I have a black belt in Taekwondo. I trained boxing for many years, done jiu-jitsu with Magno, whatever. I have all the pieces of what goes into mixed martial arts. But that's not my skill set. All right. I have that because I want to make sure that I'm up to date on training methods, that what I teach is relevant. If I teach my students how to defend a takedown, it's from having trained takedowns with people who know what they're doing, not just like from my fantasy stuff, So I did the sport jiu-jitsu tournament and stuff. So I've dabbled in all the different things that encompass mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
But that would not be my skill set. So to take my Wing Chun skill sets, go, I want to fight in mixed martial arts using my skill set. Well, first of all, I'm too old, but assume I had this skill set when I was in my 20s.
Right.
Even the version of me in the 20s, who was kind of a shithead and was just totally focused on Wing Chun, if you would have gone back then and would have been like, hey, do you want to fight in mixed martial arts or whatever in your weight class? If you could convince me to do it, say, yeah, but I need to go train mixed martial arts. For like, even that early version of me would have been like, but like what I do is for practical self-defense. It's not about gouging someone's eyes out. It's like, no, I understood like, no, I mean, like if someone accosts me and comes at me, I have my Wing Chun. And if I need to defend myself, I can do something quick and rapid. And I know how to deal with grips and holds and all sorts of stuff. But my skill set is not for mixed martial arts.
Right.
I would need to,
train,
go to Henzo's, and I would need to do some Muay Thai and some boxing, and I would need to get some experience before I would entertain that, because that is a different arena.
Yeah.
Like even the very green version of me totally understood that, which is why I don't understand why this is not the me after 20 years coming to this realization, right? Me 20 years ago would have been like, oh, no, like the mixed martial arts, those guys are really good. That's not what I do. You would need to train differently for that. But the other Wing Chun people don't seem to have that memo. And so for me, what Wing Chun would need, and what I've been working on lately is, for WT people, traditionally WT has all these sections and these long form Chi Sao programs. I've actually gutted all of that stuff and got rid of it. I teach now skill sets and skill groups for the various Chi Sao levels. I don't teach sections. And I'm finishing up the wooden dummy and the Buji one right now.
Yeah.
Just getting rid of all these old vestiges of the sections and stuff. This is how Sifu Learning transmitted info when the main mode of transmission were seminars. But now that you have instructors who are established, you don't need to use a seminar mode of transmission when you have established instructors. You can now teach it in a more direct way, right? So the utility of the sections, I mean, WT outgrew the utility of the sections in the 80s. Once you have enough instructors, as people didn't get the memo, they still kept teaching sections. So what I'm trying to do is make it easier to learn, more direct and more relevant. And I'm doing that by peeling stuff away. All right. There are a lot of transitions in Sifu Learning sections that are only in there for perpetuating the section to get into the next thing, to do the next thing, which means that you're not necessarily doing it in its proper fighting context. Well, let's just do it in the way we use it in Gao Sao and in sparring, and cut out this awkward middleman of the sections, right? So I'm the, we need to hack away the very Bruce Lee statement, or we need to hack away the inessentials. All right, so streamlining, gutting. So I would be the last person to say, what Wing Chun needs is another form. You see what I mean? No. Between the Siu Tao giving you your basic fundamentals, your Chum Q putting that on wheels, your Buji giving you different striking options and recovery options, and wooden dummy making you just generally more efficient at moving and transferring power from close range. That's good. Those four aims, I think, are good.
Yeah.
What Wing Chun needs is not another form. It needs a cleanup on the training methods, on the sparring, on the way it's practiced. The problem is it's always the same with form. It's always the same. I witnessed it myself in real time. People get so bent out of shape about like, hey, Sifu said you have to do this 3 times, and then you go here and do it 2, and then you go and do this 1, right? Because everyone wants to be the one that does it exactly the way their Sifu does in Chinese martial arts, like with the forms and stuff, right? Now, in WT, we have our normal Siu Tao Chum Ki Buji wooden dummy, and then, the 2 weapons. We'll leave the weapons out. And then you had all a host of these Chi Sao sections and stuff like that, right? Well, in Europe, they would often codify sequences of footwork into footwork forms.
Footwork forms?
Yeah, so you have like all these, like, like the crab step and the arrow step and the advancing step and all this kind of stuff. And Sifu XYZ would have his own way or her own way of putting those into like a 36-step pattern. And then that is not a form that's from Yip Man or Leung Ting. That's just like, it's like a house blend of like, here's the footwork you need to know. If I put it in a sequence, it's easier to practice because it's easier to remember a sentence than it is to remember random words.
Okay.
Even if the sentence is nonsense, right?
Yeah.
So you make a little footwork form, right? And then I remember like learning some of these footwork forms in Europe and benefiting from it because, oh, cool. He's like a convenient way to remember all the different bits of footwork. But then starting to hear other instructors argue with each other about like, no, you're supposed to go to the right, then you go to the left. They would have all the same steps, but they were arguing which side, which leg went first. And I remember just thinking, this is what happens to all the forms. The person who put it together to benefit the next generation. Like, hey, look, I made it easy for you. Here are the things you need to do. Like you need to, in the case of the Sunum form, you need your balance, your posture, the knee position, the upright, the elbow, all this stuff. I made it easy for you. I put all the elemental stuff you need for Wing Chun in this form called Sunum Tao. And then rather than people just accepting that and then training it and using the form for what it is, a codification of the information, instead of discussing the information that's codified in the form, they're arguing about the codification. Damn. You see what I mean? Wow. What side, how many times? Oh, my Sivu added an extra set to the Sunum Tao form. And oh, we took this one out or whatever. And the conversation should always be, okay, but why do you need this? Why do you do it this way? What is this for? And not like, well, in my Sivu's lineage, we do the Hyun Sao externally or internally. Great. Why? Oh, because he thinks it's good for your wrist. There's always some bullshit kind of, it's like, okay, but really in the it's just good for your wrist, or there's a functional reason why you're doing this. All right. And then you start to see like it's the codification that gets tinkered with. Well, you got to start this way, start on this side. And people were fighting over the footwork forms. I used to, and this is the kind of the last story I'll leave for today because I got to teach in a moment. Yeah. There's a skill within Learning Wing Chun called yo-yo. And it's a skill where basically if you have a stiff or let's say inexperienced partner, you can kind of snatch them to fall forward. You never pull an opponent directly to you because it'll give you a shoulder or headbutt, but you kind of make them fall to the side because they're being stiff, and you kind of jut them and make them fall, and then you push them back using your, the floor and waist power and everything like that, and then you send them back, and as they're flying away, you catch them again and bring them back, and you basically, it's the Chi Sao equivalent of ragdolling someone, right? You kind of launch them away, you pull them back in, launch them away, pull them back in. And there's and it's a really great way to control someone who's either very stiff or who's just an amateur. It's not easy to do it with people who are at the same level because they're normally not that stiff and awkward. They can stick and adapt with you. But if you have someone who's maybe a non-Wing Chun guy who's just stiff or just someone who's lower on the totem pole, you can kind of ragdoll them, right? Yeah. The yo-yo expression is a way to show this skill. It's kind of like flexing that you're at a higher skill, right? Oh, man. And I remember when I learned the yo-yo from Sifu Leung Ting, I looked at all the different methods that he used because he said something that bothered me. We were doing the yo-yo in my school. And he was teaching it, and Sifu Leung Ting was this probably around 2005. And I was there with one of my Chinese students, with Elliot Leung from Stamford, Connecticut. Right. And Sifu Leung Ting was walking by watching us do this, and he was there with a friend, and his friend said to him in Chinese, "This exercise looks really difficult." And then Sifu Leung Ting said to his friend in Chinese, "It is. I'm the only one who can do it correctly." And I remember I heard that, and my Cantonese was a little rough. Then I looked at Elliot. I'm like, "Did he just say what I thought he just said?" He's like, "Yeah, he said he's the only way he can do it." That was good enough for me. Yeah. I was like, "Okay, well, I mean, that's a problem." All right. Sifu Leung Ting in his heyday was not particularly athletic person. You wouldn't look at him and go like, "Oh, he's a specimen." Okay. Right? You wouldn't look at him and go like, he's just like, he's a movement genius. He's just someone, he looks like an accountant who trained really hard, right? And I go, okay, so it's not a matter of he's like not like a physically incredibly talented person. He's a product of hard work. So it's not that he has some genetics I don't have. And then so I'm like, okay, so it's not that. So there's got to be a technical, explainable expression of how to do this. Okay. And I'm just thinking, if he says he's the only one he can do it, that must mean he just cannot explain it well. Because I relish in the idea of taking complex things and breaking them down and teaching them so people can understand them. So I watched him multiple times doing the yo-yo with the different students, big, tall, whatever, and I wrote down all the different transitions he used. I had a bunch of video footage of him just sloshing people around, and I wrote down all those transitions. And then I trained it with Sipalau and saw how Sipalau did it, right, and wrote all those. And then I found out, there's 10 ways you can do it. Wow. All right, so I just had this list, and I compared them, and I boiled down, anytime everyone did the same one, I scratched it off, and then eventually, there's 10 ways.
Uh-huh.
And then so what I did is I was like, I'm going to codify those 10 ways so my students can learn it. And we don't have this I'm the only one who can do it. Bullshit. No. If we have a drill, we can practice it, we can develop the skill.
Okay.
So I created almost like a yo-yo flow of these 10 things, right? So to a certain degree, I created my own form. But it was just a train hey guys, I want you guys to get good at the yo-yo here. Okay. Go this one first, then do this one, then do this one, right? And I was very proud. You can ask Nicole, my senior students, I had somewhat codified Leung Tang's uncodifiable yo-yo game, right?
I'm the only one that can do it.
And then and then the students could do it and then get really good at it. But then I started to hear my students go, no, you don't do that one first, you do this one first. Right?
Yeah.
And then no, it should be here. And then I was like, no, you just need all 10.
Yeah.
If you do it the way I showed you, then you don't have to think about remembering it any other way.
Okay.
All right? Because the order of 10 I gave were just so you can remember it. It wasn't, the order doesn't mean shit. Because you touch hands, you don't know how you end up. You need to know all of them. They're from double outside, double inside, this way, your arm is up, your arm is low, whatever, right? So I said, no, the point is that, and then I started to hear my own students argue about no. Sipa started with this, and then he went there. And honestly, if you just had all of them, it wouldn't matter.
Okay.
If you just did the sequence I showed, because it's not about doing the sequence, it's about then applying it in sparring.
Yeah.
Do the sequence to learn the movements, and then go put that into the lab in sparring and work it out. You're not going to be doing it in the sequence in sparring. The sequence is just like the Sunumtao form has an order because it has to have an order.
Yeah.
But maybe you could put the fourth set where the third set is and move the third set. So it wouldn't change anything, right? No. But then I started to see that's the problem, is then people are no longer having conversations about the contents of the form. They're having conversations about the structure of it. And that's a problem. And that's all I got to say about that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Support us on Patreon or right here on YouTube. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a Kung Fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm sea gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your Kung Fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Tsun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, bam.
Mikey has got the clap.
Fantastic.
From that girl.
All right. So, Instagram subscriber reels and all sorts of goodies there. You can see all the various tiers. If you don't want to go all the way over to Patreon, you can support us right here on YouTube. If this is where you consume this content, we have a couple of membership options and including the ability to get your questions done in an AMA episode.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of secret forms, lots of 68 Elvis was the best Elvis. Let's get to it. No.
68 comeback.
Got to be 68 comeback.
69
so
Elvis. Lots of 68 Elvis. No!
You're allergic to the word comeback. Don't call it a comeback.
I've been here for years, rocking my tears, putting suckers in peers. Suckers in fear.
Suckers in
As a Pier 39.
Yeah, I know. He's just putting them on a
Pier
pier and
68.
leaving them there and walking away.
Pier 68.
Here you go, son. You're on Pier 32. I'll see you later.
See you later. Peace.
Putting suckers in piers.